Alright, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another video. I know it's been a while since I've put something up. I've been busy with work, personal life stuff, and recently started kart racing at a local club. So pretty much any mental bandwidth that I have outside of work and family stuff is taken up by the kart. Haven't done a lot of iRacing lately. I had planned on doing the full Grand Prix tour, but I've missed the first 2 weeks, mainly because minor injury sustained from the kart racing kind of made it to where I didn't feel very good turning the wheel, but at least for a full race distance like that. So, but I wanted to put something out about this car right here, the iR-01. For those of you who are unaware, iRacing recently did an update on it where they took because of the whole situation with IndyCar, they decided to take this car, give it an oval kit, and make it a not IndyCar. And then on top of that, which they haven't really discussed much openly, but it was mentioned in the release notes that they did do some updates to the car for its road racing capabilities, in order to, and so it does drive a little differently. According to the release notes, they updated the aerodynamic model and the tire model. But in the forums, they said basically all they did was just put higher downforce on it. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly. Something's definitely changed because it has driven differently. So I wanted to kind of cover not just the changes made this time around, but kind of go through the history a bit. And the main question that I had when the build dropped a couple weeks ago was, did they fix it? This car's had a rough history, and so kind of wanted to see how things were going with it. They made some adjustments to the series as well, where it is now a 20-minute fixed setup series, which has pretty much blunted any interest I had in actually racing it, but there does seem to be an uptick in participation this week. Of course, the car is at Spa, and which is already a highly popular racetrack, and the fixed setup 20-minute thing usually tends to draw people in. So I decided to go ahead and do a run at Imola, and see how the car feels. Spa is a little weird because there's a lot of long straightaways and you can really push the crap out of the car, but I feel like the real test is going to be at tracks like Imola that are a little bit more technical. So I'm going to show you a few laps while I'm driving and do a little voiceover, kind of discussing the car, its history, and where it seems to be at right now. So if you guys enjoy this content or any of my other content, be sure to like and subscribe. Or if you want to see more videos of my dogs interrupting me, you can also catch that if you like and subscribe to videos. So we'll get going. Now let's start off with a little bit of a recap on this car and kind of a little bit of its history. So for season 1 2021, iRacing announced and released this car, the Dallara iR-01. iRacing basically said that it was a bit of a COVID project, that during lockdown obviously they couldn't go and scan new stuff, and so one of the things that we got out of it, aside from certain projects that had been on the back burner for forever, like Long Beach, was this car. Essentially, iRacing, as I understand it, was looking at getting back into high-level open-wheel racing, having another World Championship Series. But there are a lot of legal hurdles that come with trying to scan and add a real-world Formula One car. And teams have been notoriously difficult to work with, and so iRacing decided to build their own car, based somewhat on different eras of Formula One regulations, and they partnered with Dallara to do this. So Dallara, I think, came up with the initial design, and then iRacing implemented it into the sim. Gave it all its own properties and everything else. So this car kind of evokes a bit of the past of Formula One by having no ERS or DRS on board. There's very few in-car adjustments available. Of course, with this being a fixed setup series, I think only the throttle shape and braking or brake bias is the only thing that's actually adjustable. And then it's powered by a V10 engine, which of course is my favorite thing about the car. Even on its worst day, the thing I loved more than anything else was listening to it scream around the racetrack, and so sometimes I just load it up and drive it just to hear that sound. They also mentioned that it was based on future F1 specs, which is now the present, because at the time the 2022 regulations were a year away from being instituted. So this car is somewhat based around the same idea. It has very simplified aerodynamic profile over the top of the car. Basically 3 elements on the front wing, which is very small, and then a very simple rear wing setup. But most of the downforce is actually generated from underneath the car, using Venturi tunnels and ground effect. And basically the same idea as current F1 cars. It's also much lighter. There's no halo, as you can see. It's got about the same width as a current F1 car, maybe slightly wider. Big tires, low profile, just like current F1 cars, and also, but it's got a shorter wheelbase, I believe. So it's a little bit, should be at least a little bit more sketchy to drive. So as I was saying, iRacing released the car 2021 Season 1, and I drove it during week 13 that week. And honestly, I enjoyed the car. I thought it drove fantastic. It was a lot of fun. It basically drove exactly like I thought it would. There was one minor problem that I had with it, and I think a lot of people had this problem. The force feedback or something was a little wonky, and so the car would kind of wobble down the straightaways. Wheel would turn side to side as you went down the straightaway, and then but then it would kind of clear up once you hit the brakes and went through the corner, and it really didn't do anything weird there. So at the end of week 13, iRacing dropped an update to the car that was supposed to fix the wobbling and a couple of other issues that they picked up on, and that update did not go well. The car had almost zero grip on throttle. The wobbling was fixed, but then the car started just acting really strange. There was no feel to it. It just didn't really. It was like driving F1. Well, I guess at the time it would have been F1 2020. There was just the force feedback just really didn't have anything to it. Season 1 goes through. It goes from being somewhat decently populated in week 1 to basically dead by week 4. So then Season 2, iRacing adds another update, and they also start up the Pro Qualifier series, which was about the only way we were able to. There was an official race in the car. It was the day of the Pro Qualifiers. So and again, they fixed up some of the issues from the Season 1 build, but there was still a lot of problems with it in Season 2. Season 3 rolled around. iRacing finally dropped what ended up being the last update for a long time, and that added some of the grip back to the car, but it also drove strangely. The way I always described it was that it was like the front and the rear of the car weren't attached to the same body, the same chassis or anything. You would drive off into a corner, the rear would snap around on you, and then when you try to you'd catch it and try to go back through the corner, but then the front wouldn't turn, and it was just kind of it drove extremely awkwardly. And then you would power out of a corner, you could light the tires up, but no matter what you did, you couldn't force the rear to come around and actually spin the car out. It was really strange. It was almost like it had traction control on, like a really strong traction control. And from that point forward, of course, season 3 and 4, I think, was when the World Championship Series happened. So that was about the only attention the car got. And then from that point forward, it died an unfortunate death. And then didn't get touched again until this past season build, when iRacing needed a quasi replacement for the car that was rendered almost useless by Motorsports Games. So when they gave it the update to make it drive better on ovals, they also included a small update to make it drive better on road courses. And so the car does seem to be, and it does seem to be a little bit better. So I'll take you around for a lap and kind of go over how I'm feeling about the car, and then do a final rant and review at the end. Alright, so I'm going to go through a couple of laps here. The car definitely does seem to drive a little bit better. There's a noticeable increasing, or at least it drives more like a car. Like I said before, it was almost as if the front and rear weren't connected to the same piece of machinery. Of course, you could see right here that it is still a little bit, it'll jump out and bite you occasionally if you're not on it. But like I said, it seemed like the front and the rear weren't connected to the same piece of machinery, and that seems to not really be the case anymore, from what I can tell. The car doesn't do any strange stuff I don't really expect it to do. Anytime I've lost the rear end or had some understeer issues, I knew why that happened. However, there are still some odd quirks about it. There have been a couple moments where I would turn the wheel, for example, and the front end, it was almost like there was a delay. It wasn't like understeer. It was like it took the sim a second for the car to realize I was trying to get it to turn, and it was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's turn now. So I do wonder if some of the issue, quote unquote, with this thing is that it's maybe the force feedback still needs some tuning on the iRacing end, because there are moments where I can't feel wheel spin, or I can't really feel understeer in the way that I feel it on other cars. So that's really kind of my biggest thing that I've really noticed. I do know the iRacing fix setups are intentionally, well, I don't know about intentionally, but they're designed in a way that's a bit more understeery anyway, which is kind of normal for them. They, I guess, feel like the more the car plows, the easier it is for people to drive it. So that's one thing that, anybody who tries to drive it fast is going to have to figure out and get past, is to learn how to drive a little bit of an understeer setup. But for me, it's not unmanageable. As much as I don't care for understeer, it's not that frustrating W12, W13 understeers like a pig sort of thing. It's more of just kind of a general lack of front end grip at times. But yeah, overall, at least based on the fixed setup and my little bit of running with it in test sessions, it does seem like the car's a lot better. Again, I don't know if maybe iRacing's experience with the W13 kind of helped guide them in a good direction or not, but whatever they did, it does seem to be working. So yeah, if you haven't given it a run recently on road courses, give it a shot. See what you think of it. It does, again, it's a high downforce, high performance open wheel car, so it will bite. It's still not suddenly a casual man's car just because of these updates. It's still got its challenges, but at least now they're challenges that feel like they should be represented on this car, and not because it's broken. All right, so recap. Ultimately, as far as road course racing goes, the car does feel quite a bit better. Um, but you can definitely tell that some of the old quirks are still there, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. The car doesn't have, it drives more like a car. And there's been some complaint from old time racers of this, that it drives just like every other open wheel car, or drives just like the W13 and all this other stuff. And that doesn't really bother me too much because it's based on a similar aerodynamic concept as the W13. It's got similar physical properties. It's similar width. I think it's a shorter wheelbase, but it's got a similar width to it. It's got the more simplified over-the-top aero. It uses Venturi tunnels underneath the car to use ground effect. Um, it was intentionally built similarly to the 2022 F1 regulations. So, uh, in my mind, it's supposed to drive similarly to the W13. It shouldn't be a whole lot different. It probably, because of the shorter wheelbase, should be a little bit more sketchy on throttle, which it is. Um, but it should, yeah. I don't see where the problem is with that really. I mean, if we're being honest, the biggest thing to me that seems a bit unrealistic is the fact that the car has a pretty strong slipstream, which, according to what I understand of the W13's aerodynamics and the 2022 regulation aerodynamics in general, is that they shouldn't really have a very strong slipstream to begin with, just because of the way the air underneath the car comes out and goes straight up, and it comes up with so much force that it pushes the over the top air up as well. So the slipstream shouldn't be this strong, but um, overall though it seems to be a pretty good update. I'm not really going to cover the oval racing side of this because I don't have anything to compare it to. It seems a lot of people that have tried it seem to enjoy it. It's an Indy car on steroids on ovals, but that's really about all I could tell you. Like I said, I don't really have a frame of reference to sit there and tell you, well, build or two ago it was better or worse or what have you. So yeah, I do like the way it drives now. I can't say I'm a huge fan of the whole fixed setup 20-minute sprint concept, but anybody that knows me and knows my racing knows that I tend to prefer longer open setup races anyway, so it's not too surprising that that kind of irritates me. Anyway, that concludes that particular rant. I do think that do I think that the sudden participation spike is gonna be good for the long run? I don't know. Um, this first week is at Spa, which is a very popular track in general. And you figure there's probably a lot of people that were curious about any changes that were made to the car. But what I've seen also is that a lot of the races that have gone official this week, they're small fields, 12, 15 cars, and they're all mostly lower, like 1,000 and lower I rating guys driving it, which is kind of odd, but um, you know, I mean, more power to them. But the thing I've noticed though is that in those races, it seems like there is a lot of crashing. There are a lot of cars that don't finish. I spectated a race yesterday, and there was only 3 that finished, so out of 12. So, and it's not even from people just being stupid and not hitting the brakes, getting into turn 1 off the grid or anything like that. It's just people just driving along and they lose it and smash into a wall, and that ends their day. And it's so I would imagine at some point these guys are going to get sick of crashing all the time, and they're not going to want to drive it. And then for all kinds of reasons, the higher IR folks are avoiding it like the plague. So, uh, you know, I don't, I really don't see this tracking. I don't see this being something that gets super popular and stays there. Um, but I guess it remains to be seen. If you haven't driven it yet, and or if you have driven it before and kind of were a little put off by the way it drove previously, I can tell you, at least with the fixed setup and the recent updates, the car drives better. It does drive like you would expect it to for the most part. Like I said, there's a couple little old quirks that I think still pop up, but it doesn't do the crazy, you know, throw it into a corner, rear end steps out suddenly, and you're like, and then so you go to catch it, but then you understeer horribly from like the center off, and so you're like doing everything you can to get it to go. But it is still a bit of a challenge. It still doesn't like curbs. It still lights the tires up if you're in too low of a gear and you raffle stomp the throttle. So um, I think it's definitely worth giving it a shot, especially if 20-minute fixed setup races are your thing. Um, I do think it would be great of iRacing to finally add this car to AI. I'm not really sure what's taking so long with that. Because if nothing else, those of us that do like to mess with the setups, that's the only way I think we're going to be able to do that. So, uh, I think it'd get more people to drive the car, honestly. I think if they got a chance to drive it against AI and actually race it there and not have to worry about getting losing IR or SR from demolishing the car after 10 seconds on the track, maybe give them a chance to practice in racing scenarios and actually enjoy it. So hopefully AI comes to this car sooner rather than later. So that'll do it on my review of the slightly overhauled iR-01. So if you enjoyed the video, you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe, and keep an eye out, because hopefully I'll start posting more videos soon with the iRacing Grand Prix Tour and very possibly the Gen 4 Cup. That's something else that's really piqued my interest from this last build, and I was among those who was asking for that. Again, it's a fixed setup series, so kind of a bummer there, but maybe maybe if it's popular enough, we can get iRacing to add an open setup version along with it. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.